So, I've passed 75,000 subscribers, and as I do when I hit a major milestone, I'm feeling a little self-indulgent. So today I'd like to take you on a little trip to look at the remains of one of my favourite old London railways, the London and Blackwall. In the 18th century, the Port of London was suffering badly from overcrowding. Vessels would be moored up for days, blocking the river, making them prey for river pirates and ruining perishable goods. So it was that the docks were built east of the city, large modern facilities for quickly and securely unloading cargo. Now the question was, how to get that cargo into the city? The Surrey Iron Railway in what is now South London had shown the way in 1803. A horse can haul more on iron rails than on a road. So it was proposed to build a tramway down the commercial road. This didn't happen. But a compromise was reached where lengths of smooth stone were laid along the street to make haulage a little easier. Not ideal, but an improvement. Then there was the question of passengers. The quickest way to get to London from Kent and Essex was by steamer, and that only added to the traffic on the Thames. So it was proposed to build a railway to Blackwall. Blackwall was an ideal place for steamers to moor up. The water was fairly deep, and there was already a quay capable of taking several ships. In 1833, a parliamentary inquiry determined that a railway would be the very thing. There were two proposals. One was by George and Robert Stephenson, and would have run in a cutting below street level, and the other was by John Rennie, and was to run along a viaduct. Eventually, backers of the two proposals joined forces, and the Stephensons and Rennie stepped aside in favour of William Cubitt. Cubitt had a number of recommendations. He liked the idea of running it along a viaduct, partly because he figured they could fit the arches out as houses. He also proposed a broader track gauge than usual. The line would be built to a gauge of 5 feet as opposed to the more common 4 feet 8.5 inches. This was before there was a national rail network and any need for compatibility between railways. Then there was the question of power. Locomotives were already becoming well established, thanks in large part to the Stephensons and their rocket of 1829. But the concept of sending a fire-powered machine through a dockland full of wooden sailing ships was not exactly popular. There was a solution proposed by the engineer George Parker Bidder. Bidder was so good at maths that as a child he'd actually been exhibited under the name Calculating Boy. He proposed the idea of cable haulage. Instead of locomotives, there would be a stationary steam engine at each end of the line that would winch the carriages along with a rope. The line was originally to run from Minories, or is that Minories, to Blackwall. The station was here, where Tower Gateway on the Docklands Light Railway is today. The company wanted to get further into the city, and while they were still working on the Minories terminus, Parliament granted them permission to extend to Fenchurch Street, inside the city boundaries. This had always been the goal. The Blackwall end of the line was right next to the East India Docks, and so the railway wanted their city end to serve East India House, the East India Company's headquarters. The line was originally to be called the Commercial Railway, but it was officially named the London and Blackwall Railway in 1839. On the 4th of July 1840 it was opened. The stations on opening were Minories, Limehouse, West India Docks and Poplar. The station of Shadwell and St George's East opened 3 months later, a short distance from where the present-day Shadwell station is on the DLR, and the old station building is still very visible. Fenchurch Street would open a year later in 1841, and Minories would close in 1853, having been superseded. Operation was kind of weird. At the start of each journey there would be a 7-coach train. As the train approached a station, the rearmost coach would be uncoupled and coast to a halt by the platform. Another coach would be waiting at the station ahead of the train and would be picked up as the train passed through. The train as a whole wouldn't stop until the end of the line, so if you wanted to travel between any of the intermediate stations, well, tough luck. There were other problems too. Early in the line's operation, the rope snapped so violently that it tore through the viaduct parapet. The rope was replaced with steel cable, but still snapped occasionally. When it did, the passengers had to get out and push. If this all seems a little ramshackle, I should mention that the railway was the first in the world to communicate between stations with the electric telegraph, a state-of-the-art invention patented only 3 years earlier. The operators would have been the first people ever to be fired for making personal calls on company time until the company realised that the code they had devised for doing this also enabled more efficient operation. Keep that one in mind next time your boss catches you on Facebook. Passenger numbers were initially disappointing and goods traffic very poor indeed. In 1842 a new station was opened, here at Cannon Street Road. This did nothing to improve matters, and the station wound up being closed in 1848. In desperation, the directors reduced the fare from 6p to 4p. The shareholders were extremely displeased, but the shareholders were wrong. The reduced fare increased passenger traffic and gained the line the nickname of the fourpenny rope, which sounds like some sort of euphemism for hanging. In 1845, change came. The London and Blackwall wanted to extend to Epping and struck a deal with the Eastern Counties Railway. This turned sour. It's all very complicated and involves a lot of politics, double-dealing, and, in one case, the Eastern Counties Railway pulling up track to prevent the Blackwall from using it. Anyway, the long and short of it was that an extension was built to Bow, and the Blackwall Railway was converted to standard gauge track with locomotive haulage, which made it compatible with other lines. This not only improved the Blackwall services, but enabled them to make money by allowing other companies to run traffic over their line into the docks. In 1871, the Millwall Extension Railway was built, which extended the London and Blackwall to Millwall. Does exactly what it says on the tank. In 1866, the whole shebang got leased by the Eastern Counties Railway, which had by then become the Great Eastern Railway. The lease on the Blackwall was for 999 years, which seems very optimistic to me. For the sake of what remains of my own sanity, I'll stick to the original basic route from Fenchurch Street to Blackwall. I'm not opposed to the concept of looking at the other lines in future videos, though. In 1872, 2 new stations were opened. One was at Leman Street, here, of which nothing visible remains. It was very close to Cannon Street Road, so God only knows why they thought it would work a second time, but it stayed open until 1941. The other was at Millwall Junction. The station is long gone, but the entrance was here, on what's now Harrow Road. The name comes from the fact that this was where a line to Millwall branched off, although the station itself is in Poplar, not Millwall. Useful. While I'm about it, let's look at the other stations I haven't covered yet. So I've talked about Fenchurch Street, Leman Street, Cannon Street Road and Shadwell. The next station was Stepney, which was renamed Stepney East in 1923 and renamed Limehouse in 1987. You can see a few remnants of the Victorian station about the place. Then there was the original Limehouse station, which confusingly was some way east of the current Limehouse. It was also spelt differently. Limehouse was written as 2 words when the station was opened. If you're on a DLR train, the station was where these funny blue rib things are. The building is, again, still visible. West India Docks was the next station. It would have been about here, alongside the West India Quay Cineworld, although obviously that wasn't there in the 1840s. I wondered if these protruding stones here were anything to do with the old platform, but they don't match up with any images I've seen of the station. I've already looked at Millwall Junction, so the next stop along the route will be Poplar, which is not where Poplar Station on the DLR is. The closest modern station to the old Poplar is Blackwall, which is nowhere near where the old Blackwall station is. Do you see the nonsense I have to put up with? The first Poplar station only lasted from 1840 to 1845 when it was moved over the road. There's nothing to see of either site, and in fact just about everything around here disappeared under roads and other redevelopment. What you can see is this hydraulic accumulator tower that powered the dockside cranes. This was built by the Midland Railway, who had a line here. They had another accumulator tower at Minories, which sadly has been demolished in recent years. The final station was Blackwall. To get here, I took a DLR train from the modern Blackwall station because at this point I'd done 15 miles on foot. The closest modern station is East India, which you may recall was the dock that Blackwall station served. The actual station was roughly here at Virginia Quay. It was quite grand by the Blackwall line standards, so it's a real shame that nothing survives today. To try to make some sense of all these stations to modern viewers, I've done a little sketch map. Stations in red are London and Blackwall, stations in blue are DLR. I'm thinking I might actually produce a full video to try and clear all this up, because frankly I barely even understand it myself. What brought about the decline and eventual fall of the London and Blackwall was, ironically, railways. As the rail network became more established, so fewer people came to London by steamer, and so the Blackwall line lost the mainstay of its passenger traffic. In 1926, during the general strike, the section from Stepney East to Blackwall was closed to passengers, and in 1946, Blackwall was demolished to make way for a power station, which has itself subsequently been demolished, sic transit gloria mundi. In 1966, the rest of the line was officially closed, although it had long been out of use by this point. But, astute and intelligent viewer that you are, you've no doubt figured out that this wasn't the end. When plans were devised to redevelop the Docklands, improved public transport was considered absolutely key, and with that in mind, the London Docklands Development Corporation noted with interest that the area already had a whole lot of railway infrastructure that no one was using. So the old route rose again. As such, it's gone from strength to strength. Of course, the DLR goes far beyond the original London and Blackwall Railway, but that, as they say, is another story. Hello all, I hope you enjoyed this look at a not quite vanished railway. I'd like to thank all of my delightful subscribers for helping me reach this milestone, and if you want to be as cool as them, you can subscribe yourself. Anyway, I'll see you all again very soon, and thanks once more for your support. Cheerio.